I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. For years, I had a good job, a stable life, and a happy marriage. But everything changed the day my wife, Claire, started working for a new company, and her boss, Gavin, an arrogant, overconfident alpha type, took a particular interest in her. At first, I brushed it off. It was just work, after all. But there was something unsettling about Gavin. He was always too charming, too eager to spend time with Claire outside of regular office hours. I noticed how he would invite her to after-work drinks, offer to help her with late-night projects, and make her laugh just a little too much. I tried not to make a big deal of it, but one night, Claire came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't hers. When I asked about it, she claimed it was from a new perfume she had tried. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One evening, I decided to confront Gavin directly. I knew it was a risk, but I couldn't stand the thought of him making advances on my wife without me doing anything about it. I showed up at the bar where they were having drinks after work, uninvited, to see for myself. The moment I walked in, Gavin greeted me with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. He was sitting too close to Claire, leaning in just a bit too much. There was something about the way he looked at her, protective, possessive even, that made my stomach churn. I could feel my heart racing as I walked up to the table. "Mind if I join you guys?" I said, forcing a smile. Gavin stood up, his demeanor instantly changing. He tried to shake my hand, but his grip was firm, almost like a challenge. "Of course, man," he said, his voice smooth but with an edge I didn't like. "Always good to see a supportive husband. Claire's told me so much about you." Claire looked surprised, but then quickly masked it with a polite smile. "What are you doing here, honey?" she asked, her voice a little too high-pitched. I sat down, keeping my eyes on Gavin the entire time. There was tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. As the night went on, Gavin seemed to go out of his way to dominate the conversation, subtly undermining me at every turn, making comments that belittled my job, my life choices, and even the way I treated Claire. But when he casually brought up how great it was that Claire was finally getting the recognition she deserved, I couldn't help but notice his eyes flickering to her lips for just a second. It was then I knew. I wasn't just overthinking it. Gavin had been eyeing my wife, trying to undermine me while also trying to charm her into something more. That night, when we finally got home, the argument exploded. Claire was defensive, telling me I was being paranoid. She insisted that nothing had happened, that Gavin was just a flirt, and that I was insecure. But it wasn't just about the flirting. It was about respect. And somewhere along the way, I had lost that respect for both Gavin and Claire. The weeks that followed were a constant battle. Claire was more distant, as if she'd been pulled into a web spun by Gavin. I started noticing small things. A change in how she dressed, how she would smile a little too brightly whenever she mentioned him. It was like she had fallen under his spell. Then, one day, everything came to a head. Claire called me frantic. She had been at work late again, and Gavin had asked her to stay even longer. When she refused, he grew increasingly insistent. The look in her eyes when she told me this broke something inside me. The man she once trusted, the man who was supposed to be her protector, was trying to control her, and now she was too scared to stand up to him. It took everything I had not to confront Gavin physically, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I put a plan into motion. I dug into Gavin's background, found out some of his secrets, and began collecting evidence. It wasn't long before I found something that could destroy him, an affair with another woman at the office, one he had been hiding for months. I kept the evidence close to my chest, knowing when the right time would come to use it. The next week, I arranged a meeting with Claire and Gavin. It was at a coffee shop, public and neutral territory. Gavin walked in with that cocky smile, but the moment he saw me sitting across from Claire, his face hardened. We talked for a while, but things escalated quickly. When I revealed the evidence of his affair, he stammered, trying to salvage his pride. But it was too late. He was caught, exposed, and the power he held over Claire shattered. In the end, I didn't just win back my wife. I reminded myself that no one should ever let anyone intimidate them, no matter how alpha they may seem. Gavin underestimated me, and that, in the end, was his biggest mistake. The moment Gavin realized what I had on him, his facade crumbled. He tried to salvage his dignity, but it was clear he had been blindsided. His usual bravado turned to nervous twitching, his eyes darting between Claire and me as if searching for some way out. But there was no escape. The truth had been laid bare, and his power was gone. "You're bluffing," he tried to say, his voice faltering slightly, but his eyes betrayed his desperation. "You don't have anything." I slid my phone across the table, displaying the evidence. The photos, the messages, the emails he thought he could hide. His affair with that woman at the office. The lies he'd been feeding Claire about how harmless his behavior was. It was all there. Claire's face went pale as she looked at the screen, then back to me. Her lips trembled as she processed everything. "How long, Gavin? How long did you think you could keep this a secret?" Her voice was no longer the same gentle tone I had heard for years. It was sharp, wounded, and strong. Gavin stammered. "I didn't mean for it to get like this. It's not what you think." "Don't," Claire interrupted, standing up abruptly. "I trusted you. I believed you." She turned to me, her face full of regret, but there was also a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there in months. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have listened to you." Seeing her like that, so resolute in her disappointment, broke whatever remained of Gavin's confidence. He tried to regain his composure, but it was no use. "You don't know what you're doing," he sneered at Claire, clearly grasping at whatever control he thought he still had. "You'll regret this." Claire's voice was firm as she stood her ground. "No, I won't. Not anymore." Gavin's shoulders slumped, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. He had no power over us anymore. He was exposed, both as a manipulative boss and a liar. The very alpha persona he had used to intimidate both me and Claire had crumbled, leaving nothing but a shell of a man who had underestimated his prey. As we left the coffee shop, Claire stayed silent, her mind clearly processing everything that had just happened. It wasn't until we were in the car, driving home, that she finally spoke again. "I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry. I let him get in my head. I didn't realize what was happening until it was almost too late." I reached over, taking her hand in mine. "I just want you to be happy, and I want you to know you don't have to deal with this kind of behavior ever again. You're strong enough to walk away from it." Claire squeezed my hand, and I could see a weight lifting from her shoulders. The tension that had been building for months seemed to dissolve, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who was capable of standing up for herself, for us. Over the next few days, Gavin's position at the company began to unravel. The affair he had been hiding, combined with his abusive tactics toward employees, became a topic of conversation throughout the office. The company, once proud to have him at the helm, swiftly moved to distance themselves from him. He was fired, and his reputation was tarnished beyond repair. For me, though, it wasn't just about him getting what he deserved. It was about us finding our way back to each other. Claire and I spent the following weeks having long conversations, rebuilding the trust that had been shaken. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but we were stronger for it. The love and respect that had once been there slowly returned, piece by piece. Gavin, on the other hand, was left to pick up the pieces of his broken career and his shattered ego. As for me, I'd learned a valuable lesson. No one can intimidate you unless you let them. And sometimes the biggest strength lies in knowing when to stand up, when to expose the truth, and when to walk away from toxic influences. Gavin's mistake wasn't just underestimating me. It was thinking that he could control Claire. In the end, it wasn't his alpha personality that mattered. It was his lack of integrity, and that's something no one can fake for long.